Yes, I already know what you're thinking. The pothead strategy for schools. What is this guy talking about now, right? I mean, come on. Let's face it. And the old man has lost it, apparently, is probably what many of you think, right? And I can imagine, I can understand if my legions of fans are a little weirded out by something like the pothead strategy for schools, right? Well, what do you mean, right? Probably 2/3 of the audience, at least, is thinking, well, the potheads in my school, they're a unique group, right? They're the ones that sit outside on the stoop and get wasted or baked or stoned. And what possible connection could that have for a strategy? And then what possible reason or connection could it have with schools, right? Doesn't sound right, does it? Right? It has kind of a, I don't know, kind of a dirty way to it, pothead and schools and stuff like that, right? And let's face it. Every school has its group of potheads. Some have bigger groups than others. Let's just put it that way. Not that I'm speaking from experience. And so I have to give credit where credit is due. I was listening to episode 41 of the Unregistered Podcast, the Thaddeus Russell podcast, which is one of the better ones because it has, in a medium and in a message, both of those two things presented in a manner that you may not agree with 100%. And that really is a mental workout unto its own. You really should find some things that rattle you around the edges. So that's where this comes from. And in that episode, Russell's talking to Michael Boldin, who runs the 10th Amendment Center, and they're talking about the marijuana movement, the decriminalization of marijuana, the acceptance of marijuana as medicinal marijuana in California. And what they're talking about is, they mention potheads and they mention strategy a lot, so I just put those two words together because what happened in California is the federal government said this is a Schedule 1 substance and we are going to crack down on marijuana use. And that was the Bush administration, and it was the Obama administration, right? You learned scary things about the Obama administration from real analysts. Very quick example, he talks about, Boldin talks about how in the first 4 years of the Obama administration, they spent twice as much money as the Clinton and W. Bush administration on raids of marijuana dispensaries and things like that during the Obama administration. So that means the Obama administration was cracking down on the marijuana movement, right? A very leftist, hippie type thing. Just rapacious numbers, terrible numbers of dollars spent and lives hurt and people thrown in jail during the Obama administration, which is why you should have contempt. And I use that word on purpose because I do. People who are all up in arms about the Trump administration, and they were sleeping for 8 years. So an experiment for you would be to put this kind of information, look it up, do your homework, and put that information in front of someone who hates Trump. Ooh, so edgy. No one else hates Trump, right? It's not Eminem or Bono, so edgy. They hate Trump and they're saying bad things. I know I'm ranting about this, but it really turns my crank because not everyone, right? People were just asleep. And they're talking about how great Barack Obama was, and they're really just ignorant. But think about this. You have the pothead strategy, what the people did in California. This is what I was talking about, right? That rant is finished, so you can relax. What they did was quite impressive, to be honest. And this is the kind of work that the 10th Amendment Center does. They came out with, and California said, and it's crazy that it's California, but those people and the state and the local governments said, we're going to say it's okay to have a medical marijuana dispensary anyway. And hundreds upon hundreds of dispensaries popped up. And the federal government did what it could, but they don't have the manpower to arrest us all. You can't stop us all, right? When we were throwing when my floor mates were throwing snowballs at police officers in Iowa City, in 1990-91 during the wintertime out there. I don't know why they were. I don't remember. And I honestly wasn't. It wasn't my nature and still isn't to throw snowballs at cops. They're guys doing their job most of the time. But the group chanted, "You can't stop us all." And what they were talking about was leverage. And that's taught in the private boarding schools, the Choates, the Kents, the private boarding schools, the Andovers, Exeter Academy, things like that. They teach leverage. They teach how to manage the herd, how to manage the rabble in your private boarding schools. They teach those people, because those people go to Harvard and Yale and they become our rulers. So the 10th Amendment Center and the marijuana, the potheads in California, basically said to the federal government, you can't stop us all. Then, on top of that, the 10th Amendment Center and other activist groups said, not only can't you stop us all, you don't have the resources to stop us all, and when you ask for us to help you go after these marijuana dispensaries, our local law says we can't do it. So you have a de facto, right, and in effect blockage of federal law, which thanks to I don't know what the Trump administration has done on marijuana. Sessions is kind of an oddball, if you ask me. He's the Attorney General. But Barack Obama kept marijuana as a Scheduled I substance, meaning you get put in a cage if you have it. No questions asked. Same thing for cocaine and heroin and stuff like that. And so the federal government didn't change anything. The God wonderfulness, God of all things fantastic, Barack Obama didn't change anything. The states and the local people did. And they said, not only can't you stop us all, you don't have what it takes, but we're not going to help you when you ask. Now think about that with schools. Do you want your local school to be the way it is? Maybe you do. Maybe you've got your local school as a wonderful place. But if the movement gets big enough, this is where leverage comes in. If you have a huge, and some, to their credit, sometimes the evangelical Christian people do this. They start their own schools. But it doesn't have to be the evangelical Christians. It could be anybody. Let's say you want to start a school that's based on just projects. You don't have to go to your school board. Well, by the book, you have to go to your school board, but maybe you don't have to go to your school board and say, well, let's start a school and we're going to have just projects and we're going to give children a ton of freedom. Kind of like the Sudbury school model does to some degree up in Massachusetts. And there's one here in the Hudson Valley as well. Maybe you don't need to do that. Maybe if a large enough group of a large enough type of people say, you know what, we're going to start a school that does, this, and you all agree it could be a very libertarian type thing, or it could be a very liberal type of philosophy, or it could be a very freedom-based or conservative type of education, maybe you don't need your overlord's permission. Maybe you don't need daddy's permission, because guess what? They can't stop us all. And that's the thing that I used to have it backwards. I had a class in graduate school when I was getting my administrative certification license, the license you get to be a principal or a superintendent or an assistant principal. And I was actually on the wrong side of the debate. There was a local school experiment in the 70s in one of the black neighborhoods in Brooklyn, and it went bad. And I look back at it now, and they had the right idea. They really did. A local school with local values, that's really the way to do it. And I remember at the time, I wasn't thinking that way. I was like, look at the example that happened. Look at how wretched it was. That local school stuff is for the birds. I was actually arguing for that. And I was glad I was on that side of the argument, because I actually believed it at the time. You needed a kind of a well-done, good people type central school authority to swat down that crazy local stuff. And look at the example of what happened. It went bad. So I think the pothead strategy, right? The potheads did it. They flipped the bird to the big shots, and they said, California said, we're gonna have medical marijuana. right? This is the after the horrid, just wretched Supreme Court case in the mid-90s that forbade the rabble from using marijuana in a medicinal way. California just said, no, sorry, not going to do it. And they used leverage. So that's pretty much it for today. That's a very rich, it's elegant in its simplicity. You can't stop us all. And the American people have been declawed. They've been intellectually declawed in understanding the civics of this. That's the original American idea to some degree, right? It's a mixed bag, and those people way back then, they had their own flaws. But the idea was that regular people simply don't need a king, they don't need a president, they don't need a daddy to hold their hand on all their local stuff, right? It would be repellent, even for the Federalists, to think that every bit of minutia of your life needs to be earmarked and green-lighted by the people in federal government. Even the most rabid Federalists, someone like James Madison, wouldn't have thought that, or god-awful Alexander Hamilton, right? Every little bit, you need a federal license to braid hair. Like, that's just a joke. And that same idea goes for schools. They didn't even talk about schools in the Constitution. Why? Because that's not an issue to discuss. That's your business. Do whatever kind of schooling you want with your children. What are you, some kind of imbecile? You need me to tell you? So, that's where the pothead stuff comes in. They did it. The marijuana world is completely different than it was 10 years ago. In 2008, the marijuana thing, the marijuana movement, the marijuana thing, it was just a bunch of weirdo libertarians, some tinfoil hat-wearing anti-government conspiracy theorists, and some old hippies that were pushing this marijuana stuff. Now, it's, someone like the Attorney General comes up with, I'm going to maybe enforce it a little more, right? He didn't really make any big waves, but he kind of suggested maybe we'll enforce it more now, possibly. We'll go back on that Obama-era stuff where he said we maybe won't move the needle that much. And people went crazy. They went nuts, right? That's so different than 10 years ago. Well, think about other things in your life that maybe you would like more freedom about, right? You don't need to be pushed around. You don't need to be. And so find, like I've told you in probably 15 other video casts, find like-minded people, find a bunch of them, and get the job done, right? Just do it. Get a bunch of people, start living the way you wish, educating your children or yourself the way you wish. Go for it from there, right? Use the pothead strategy. If those bunch of baked potheads can do it, so can you. All right, I'll talk to you later. See you next time.